Welcome to this episode of Lifestyle Matters. I'm Savina Nithyanandan, joined by Amanda Smythe from Brisbane once again. Hi Amanda, how are you?
Hi Savina, I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
You're welcome. It was really good chatting with you the last time, and I thought this episode we might talk a little bit more about the Modi Mediterranean diet that you were alluding to in the last conversation. So I guess we often have heard about about the Mediterranean diet, and that lots of people follow it to help improve their cholesterol levels, to reduce the cardiovascular disease burden, to reduce inflammation throughout their body, improve their arthritis. So for a variety of medical reasons. And we know that those Mediterranean diets usually sort of are predominantly high on our diet, high on whole grains and MUFAs and PUFAs being monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. So basically a whole lot of olive oil intake and healthy nuts to get their fatty acids from. Could you take us through what the modern Mediterranean diet is, Amanda?
I'd love to. So the Modi Mediterranean diet is the diet that was used in the SMILES trial, which was the first randomized control trial that was done to explore the question, if I change my food, can I improve my mood? And the Modi Med diet is really a modification of the classic Mediterranean diet that, as you mentioned, we know quite well and we've used for treatment in lots of different disease for its anti-inflammatory benefits. And what I guess the main difference is with this Modi Mediterranean diet is that when we look at mental health, the research was showing that red meat was actually an important inclusion, mainly for menstruating females. There's this association that can be seen between mental health and whether or not we are eating red meat. So that was important to include. So that's probably the main difference that you would notice when you're comparing the Modi Mediterranean diet to the traditional Mediterranean diet. So it's just been modified to suit the Australian way of eating. But as you mentioned, it includes all of those food groups that we know very well. So whole grains form the foundation of the diet. It's important that we're eating 6 serves of veggies and 3 serves of fruit. It encourages you to eat nuts daily is a really important one, and that's for the those muffers and puffers that we get from nuts, as well as the dietary fibre. And we also encourage that you're having 60 mils of olive oil a day, of that beautiful extra virgin olive oil. And, again, fats is one of those things that's been demonized, and people don't know whether they should be eating it or they shouldn't. But the Mediterranean diet is really rich in olive oil. And so 60 mils a day can seem quite a lot. But the good news is it makes everything taste so much better, if you can add it to your salads and your veggies. And, it's a really nice way to add flavour and texture to your food. So lots of olive oil. And then we're also asking
I think what the recommendation is... Sorry, and I found the recommendation on the Modi Mediterranean diet was to have, as you said, to have at least, it's a relatively high-fat diet where you're getting it from your MUFAs and PUFAs, and the recommendation is that it attributes about 40% of your energy intake, and 50% of them is actually from your olive oil intake, which is actually quite a lot. So 60 mils makes sense because that is quite a lot of olive oil to consume.
It is. It is.
Yeah, but as you pointed out, it's actually, it tastes good. So, you can add it in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can even add it to your baked goods, which is amazing.
Yes, and that's one of the things that we really encourage in mood food as well, is that, we're not saying don't ever eat these sweet foods. They're delicious and they're great to include, but if we can make them ourselves, then we control what we're putting in there, and we can make sure that we're not putting in huge amounts of sugar, and we're choosing healthy fats and things like pureeing pears or apples or bananas to add sweetness as well as fiber to those home baked goods is a really important and easy way just to get more nutrition in the things that we're eating.
And I think
Um,
that's a great way to add fiber to our diet because I think most Australians, we don't actually eat very much fiber in our diet. I think we consume less than half of what the recommendation is. We're meant to be consuming anywhere between 40 to 50 grams of fiber a day. And, we'd be hard pressed to even just consume about 20 grams or 25 grams a day. So, if you can bake something which is rich in, it's got the sugary goodness in the forms of fruits, has your olive oil in it, I think we're winning, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. One of our other tips there too is you can buy LSA, which is linseed, sunflower
Mm.
seeds, and almonds ground down into a powder. And that's something else that you can easily add. And kids don't know what's in there. It doesn't have a very strong flavour, but it's just adding so much nutrition into what you're actually eating.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. I make pancakes for my son, or I make French toast for him, and I add all these different grains or chia seeds and stuff into whatever I'm making
Yeah,
for him. He doesn't know it's
beautiful.
there because it's got everything else inside it. So it's like, yep, here you go. Here's your omega-3. Take it.
And that's
Um,
exactly it. If that's your normal and you can include those things into your normal everyday eating, then you're getting those incidental amounts of fiber that makes such a big difference.
Yeah. The other thing you pointed before we carry on with what further into the modern Mediterranean diet, you pointed out about iron intake. And look, as a GP, iron deficiency is such a common thing that you see in your practice, especially in your female patients, female menstruating patients, as you pointed out. And I guess it's interesting. Like once I started discovering more about the modern Mediterranean diet is when I discovered the whole implication of having too little obviously we knew about the very high levels of red meat has adverse health outcomes, maybe for mental health, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and things. But I find it really interesting that low consumption of red meat can also have adverse mental health outcomes. Would you be able to shed some light on that at all, Amanda?
Well, I think, again, if we think about how we're used to eating red meat is probably has something to do with it. So, if we imagine those huge T-bone steaks that have, the fat around the outside, and if that's the way that we're used to eating red meat in, large amounts that are high in that saturated fat, then it's going to be problematic. But when we talk about small portions of the really lean red meat, then we're not getting that anti-inflammatory effect from the saturated fats, and we're getting the benefit of the iron. So for females who are menstruating, that iron intake is really important, and our red meat eaten in those small portions is a great way to get it.
And I guess it's also really hard to, I mean, you can definitely get iron from eating your vegetables, the right amounts, but you do have to eat quite a bit of it to actually get the same amount of iron you would get from red meat. So I guess that's the other thing. If you're not getting enough from just eating your vegetables and you're feeling really tired because you're iron deficient, that will also have an impact on your mental health. If you're feeling tired all the time, you just feel so slow and sluggish and you feel really pretty low in yourself. So I guess it's just that having that little bit just to push things up a little bit um, for your iron intake is what I guess the whole idea is, isn't it?
Absolutely, that's right. And if you are eating a
Yeah.
vegetarian diet, then it is really important that you also include those lentils and legumes. Again, as Australians, they're not things that we commonly eat, and we're not confident in how to cook them. So that's another area of the Modi Mediterranean diet that we do go through to show you that it can actually be really easy to use those lentils and chickpeas and red kidney beans in your cooking, but you just need to know a few ways how. One of our favourite ways to use the tinned brown lentils, which cost less than $1 a tin and don't require any cooking, is to make like a vegetarian bolognese with that. So, frying up your garlic and your onion, tomatoes, and grating some carrot and zucchini in there, and then just adding that tin of lentils, brown tinned lentils, is a really quick and easy vegetarian meal that is going to give you that iron if you are not eating red meat.
Yeah. And I guess I'm not going to, well, given that you're a dietitian, my other question for you is what are your thoughts in eating vegetables from a tin?
There are so many different ways that we can get our veggies, and we have to be careful with the tinned veggies that they don't have lots of salt added to them. But generally, if it's a question between eating the veggies or not, then, we want you to eat them. So fresh veggies, frozen veggies, tin veggies, however you can get them, mix it up, do what suits your lifestyle, and try to eat as many as you can. So different colors is really important. And different styles of cooking and ways of including them just makes it a bit more interesting and exciting. Veggies should not be boring. There are so many things that we can do with them and so many different ways that we can cook them. And if you're prepared to experiment a little bit and make a few mistakes, then you'll probably end up loving veggies as much as anyone.
Yeah. So the rainbow color sort of thing, having all your
Absolutely.
beautiful
And
colors.
again,
Yeah.
there's lots of little things you can do to get more veggies into your food. It doesn't have to be a plate, with 3 piles of broccoli, carrots, and beans, that we classically see. I don't like eating my veggies like that either. So it's just about getting creative, and we really try to give you lots of ideas on mood food, how you can do that, whether it's roasting, barbecuing, stir frying. We even put frozen peas in our smoothies, which the police especially, we always do that, make them and get them to try it, and they can't taste the peas. So, there's lots of little tips and tricks to getting more veggies in your day.
Yeah, my personal trick is kale, adding kale and banana, and I find the banana tends to overpower the taste of the kale when you've got enough of that,
Yeah,
or putting a bit of dates in there. Get your kale, your
yep,
iron.
beautiful.
Um, yeah.
Exactly. Can really pack your smoothies
So,
full of lots of good things.
exactly right. So, I guess let's going back to one of the things you mentioned earlier, the SMILE trial. So the SMILE trial. So, what does it stand for, and what could you just take us through that a little bit about?
So the SMILES trial, as I mentioned earlier, was the first randomized control trial, which is our highest level of evidence, that set out to answer the question, if I improve my food, can I improve my mood? And for this study, they recruited 67 people who had moderate to severe depression, and they split them into 2 groups. And one group received dietary support from a dietitian, and they met with that dietitian weekly, and they followed that Mediterranean diet. And the other group received social support, which we know is an effective form of treatment for depression, and that was the control group. So over the 12 weeks, the social support group met with their psychologist, and actually it wasn't a psychologist, sorry, it was a social worker. And after the 12 weeks, what they found was that the group who followed the modern Mediterranean diet and had those weekly sessions with the dietitian, 33% of them had gone into complete remission from their depression, meaning they were no longer depressed. And that was compared to 8% in the control group who had gone into remission for their depression. So there was this really significant difference showing that diet had been an effective treatment for depression.
That's pretty amazing, though, if you think about it. Like, how diet can actually have such an impact. I mean, you've personally experienced it, as you mentioned before, and it's just impressive. You are what you eat, isn't it, Amanda? May it be
Absolutely.
mentally or
It's
physically.
it's really that
Yeah,
age
it's
old saying, like you said, you are what you eat. And we've known for a long time that what we eat affects our physical health. And we're now seeing how much it impacts our mental health as well. And the
yeah,
science around that
yeah.
is fascinating, and it's still developing too. We don't understand all the mechanisms and pathways with that process. But we are starting to understand a lot more about our gut microbiome and how that influences our brain health.
Yeah. This diet actually reminds me of the study where they were looking at the Mediterranean diet and the effects on cardiovascular disease. So pretty much, the benefits of the Predimed diet, of the Mediterranean diet, on now cardiovascular events. Similar sort of results have been documented by the sounds of it with the SMILES trial. Would I be right to say that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the information that was gained from the Predimed diet was used to help the SMILES trial as well. And
Yeah.
the results from the SMILES trial have since been replicated as well, which is exciting. So, now we sort of have this real gap between what the evidence and the research is showing and what's actually happening in clinical practice. And so what we really hope with Mood Food is that we can start to educate and empower people to understand that the research is there to show that diet and other lifestyle factors are really important when we're treating mental health, and should be the foundation of what we're doing when we're trying to improve our mental health.
Yeah. And I mean, as you pointed out, this was a randomized trial. There was a randomized controlled trial. So that's really pretty impressive that there was a study to show that documented this evidence. And the other thing is, it's not just necessarily just mental health. I mean, I know we're talking about mental health, mood, food, and everything, but it is also having other beneficial effects on your physical health, reducing your cardiovascular risk, stroke, disease, obesity, diabetes. So it's really an overall sort of improvement in your well-being just by having a better diet.
Absolutely. And, there's no negative effects to changing your diet. And I guess the other exciting thing about the SMILES trial was that they did an economic evaluation of the diet as well, and showed that it's actually cheaper than the average Australian diet, and that individuals also saved money because they lost less time out of their job roles, and they spent less money on visiting healthcare professionals as well. So, there's all these positives to come out of really looking at changing your diet. And in the SMILES trial, if people were already using medication, they did stay on that medication. So we're not saying that you should use diet instead of medication, but it can be used in combination with medication, or preferably your starting point.
Yeah, I guess what I wanted to add on what that is, you mentioned economic point of view. I'm going to also say it would also reduce carbon footprint because you're leading a more sustainable life, because if you're eating more plant-based foods, then you're reducing carbon emission and improving the footprint. So it's sort of like positives in every way. The only downside I see with it is really, gosh, now you've got to try to crack your head about how do you add all these good foods into your diet and figure out recipes and, make it part of your normal life. But what I realized is that the more often you do it, just like anything, it becomes easier. And then it just becomes second nature. You just know what to chuck into the pan or into your pot to make this wholesome meal.
That's exactly it. So if you can pick a time when you do have a bit more time and experiment in the kitchen, and just pick something simple to start with, and be open to trying new things. Our little tins of lentils that I mentioned earlier, they're such a savior at home because they are so quick and easy. And, one of my favorite lunches to make is a tin of those brown tin lentils with some tuna, olives, cherry tomatoes, rocket, some olive oil and balsamic. It's literally ready in 2 to 3 minutes, and it's such a nutritious and filling lunch.
You're making me hungry, Amanda. It sounds divine.
Good.
Yeah, but I guess what you pointed out, I think is a really important point. All we're talking about here is really predominantly about diet, and quite often it can be one of the first starting points, in terms of mental health. dietary supplementation with counseling. That can always be often a good starting point. But obviously, speak to your GP about it. If you do need medications, have the medications. Don't say no to medications, even if a health professional feels that you should. I think it's not just one way to treat things. It's a holistic way of treating conditions, and I think that's a very important point you made there.
Absolutely. And, when we speak about lifestyle, we are also big advocates for the importance of sleep and exercise and social connection. All of these things are important for our mental health. But we all eat, and we know that as a nation, we're not eating well. Poor diet is the leading cause of early death in high and middle income countries. So we know that what we eat is having a big impact on our health, and we can do much better.
Definitely. Great. Thanks so much for joining us today, Amanda. Once again, it was lovely chatting with you. I look forward for you to join us in our next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, Savina.
That's all for today's show. Thanks for joining us. Till next time.